Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Christian with Reaper Disc, and today we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the Thought Space Votum. The Votum is a neutral to moderately overstable fairway driver coming in with flight numbers of 7503. The Votum is a very easily controllable fairway driver, but with some pretty surprising distance potential. Pairing up the straight flights with some controllable turn and consistent moderate finishes, the Votum is a clear-cut option for that go-to fairway driver in your bag. The Votum has been in my bag before and often jumps in and out depending on the courses I'm playing and how I need to adjust what's in my bag to better fit those courses. Whenever it is in the bag, I still rely on the Votum to have really easily controllable flights, turn that I can manipulate to be able to carve up some tight fairways, and consistent finishes that I can count on every single time. So let's take you guys in depth of how it flies, starting off with a hyzer release. When thrown on a hyzer, it does flip up to flat even if you release it a little nose down like I did here. It flipped up to flat and continued to push and glide forward, eventually getting to a nice little mild finish as it coasted forward down the fairway. When this disc finishes, it doesn't just finish back to the left, instead it continues a forward progression down the fairway as it hyzers to the ground. When released flat, and this one was a little more nose up than the previous throw, it actually had more turnover even though I threw it nose up. It still turned over and had a good controllable turn to the flight, eventually straightening back out, and because it was a little nose up, it had a little stronger of a finish than it typically would, but still wasn't that much. It went incredibly far and just continued to push down the fairway with that, really impressive glide that this disc tends to have. Now when thrown anhyzer, this thing held the anhyzer angle pretty well the entire flight. It got up through the apex and probably at least halfway down before it started fighting back to flat. And even when it did get to flat, it didn't flex. It never straightened out and started hyzering again. It got back to a flat angle, but still continued to pan left to right. Now, all of that lateral movement is good in certain situations. You might be trying to get around a large obstacle or not have the ability to get a big forehand around a left to right corner, so instead you opt for a big backhand turnover shot. For those situations, this disc will really shine. Though all of that lateral movement does kind of impede on total distance. But it's a little bit of give and take. If lateral movement is what you're after, this disc can definitely do it. Now when thrown closer to full power, this disc had a very quick flip up all the way over to an anhyzer angle and had a lot of drift left to right. And after that, it just flattened back out and continued to then push forward. It didn't really have a huge swinging, almost pendulum flex to it. After it got flat, it just kept pushing straight and then had a good, fairly strong finish at the end with little to no ground movement. And I'll be honest, this thing absolutely bombs. A lot of times I forget that this is still a 7-speed fairway driver just because of the distance potential that this disc has. Now, all in all, the Votum is an incredibly solid option for that neutral to moderately overstable fairway driver. It does have a lot of distance potential, like I've said, and I think that the flight numbers from Thought Space are just a little bit off. I think that if you look at the numbers, you might think this disc comes in a little closer to a T-Bird 3, having a little bit of turn but more fade than anything. But instead, I think this disc is a little glidier and has a little more turn, a little less fade than what these flight numbers indicate. If I were to put my own numbers on it, I would probably say it would remain a 7-speed, but be closer to about a 5.5 glide with a -1 turn and a 2 fade. Now that 5.5, yes, I think it does have more glide than just the standard 5, but doesn't have enough to really be considered a 6. I think it's right in that happy medium, and I don't use kind of those half points whenever I give flight number, my own flight numbers very often. But in this situation, I think it's necessary. As far as that turn goes, I definitely think it has more turn than a 0. Um, I'm going to equate this as about having the turn of, like, say, a Wraith for a 7 speed. It's still going to have that good controlled turn, and you can easily manipulate it to have more or less, depending on power and release angle. But I definitely wouldn't call it flippy or something having like a -2 or even more than that. So I'm going to stick with that -1. And I just don't think it truly has a 3 fade. It fades strong and consistently, but I don't think it dumps. And whenever it does fade, it's really pushing forward. When I see a 3 fade, I'm expecting something that isn't pushing forward when it fades, but rather starting to get into dumpy territory. So I again would give it about a 7, 5.5, -1, 2. That being said, this disc is really beginner friendly. Don't mind the numbers that ThoughtSpace puts on this disc. This disc is good for beginners, and I think this would be an excellent option for those lower arm speed, kind of still new to the game players that are looking for a first good driver. They might be able to get a little bit of flip out of it, but it's not going to be kind of unmanageable overstable at lower speeds. It's going to be very consistent and still have the ability to get a full flight out of this disc, considering it still is a 7 speed. So I really think that a beginner could get a lot of use out of this as a primary driver. And then, as you get into the more experienced and faster arm speed players, they're really going to be able to utilize that, awesome, straight, mild turning flight to really carve up some tight wooded fairways. What do you guys think about the Votum? Do you think that the numbers are a little closer to what I have, or do you think ThoughtSpace has it right on the money? Drop me a comment and let me know. If you want to vote them for yourself, click the link in the description of this video to head over to reaperdisc.com and grab one there. Follow us on social media at ReaperDisc so you can keep up with all of our exclusive drops, new releases, and product restocks. Like this video and consider subscribing to the channel so you're kept up to date with all of the new content that we're putting out. We've got a lot of awesome stuff in plans to get out to you guys. Make sure not to miss out. Again, I'm Christian with Reaper Discs, and I'll see you guys in the next video.